Mercury was once synonymous with bulletproof, an empire forged when Carl Kiekhaefer turned 300 failed motors into 16,000 advance orders by betting everything on absolute reliability. But the legend that ruled racing and redefined American innovation would later collide with failures, recalls, and rivals who questioned what bulletproof really meant. So, what happened to Mercury's reputation, and could it ever be earned back? Carl Kiekhaefer walked into the Cedarburg Manufacturing Company in 1939, expecting to buy a small factory for dairy equipment. Instead, he inherited a warehouse full of broken Thor outboard motors, 300 engines that no one else wanted. Where others saw junk, Kiekhaefer saw a challenge. He tore down every motor, examining each flaw, and set his engineers to work remaking them from the inside out. Forged crankshafts replaced brittle castings. Every bearing, every seal was upgraded or redesigned. Kiekhaefer refused to let a single engine leave the shop unless it could survive the punishment he imagined on the water. His mantra was simple: if it fails in the field, it fails in the factory. By the winter of 1940, he was ready. The re-engineered motors, now bearing the name Mercury, debuted at the New York Boat Show. The gamble paid off immediately. Over 16,000 advance orders flooded in, overwhelming even Kiekhaefer's ambitious projections. Dealers and boaters, hungry for something they could trust, latched onto the promise of a motor that wouldn't leave them stranded. The Mercury name became shorthand for durability, not because of flashy advertising, but because every unit started as a problem solved and a weakness eliminated. Inside the factory, Kiekhaefer's standards set a new tone. Employees worked under the constant pressure of his perfectionism. There were no shortcuts, only relentless testing, round-the-clock assembly, and the expectation that every engine would outlast the competition. Kiekhaefer's notebooks from those first years are filled with single-minded reminders. Never trust a part you haven't tried to destroy. That obsession became Mercury's DNA. The company's reputation for being bulletproof wasn't born in a boardroom or a marketing campaign. It was forged by a founder who believed that mechanical failure was a personal insult, and who built his company to make sure it never happened again. In the mid-1950s, Mercury's reputation left the factory floor and hit the water at full throttle. The company's Mark 75 outboard, a 6-cylinder, 60-horsepower monster, became the engine of choice for racers chasing speed records and bragging rights. But these machines weren't just built for the showroom, they were thrown into the fire, tested in ways no warranty would ever cover. Mechanics tuned and rebuilt engines between heats, pushing the Mark 75 to the edge of destruction, because that's where legends were made. Nowhere was this more evident than at Lake X, Mercury's secret proving ground in the Florida wilds. In 1957, the world watched as 2 Mark 75 powered boats circled the lake for 25,003 miles non-stop, an endurance run called Operation Atlas. Crews worked in shifts, refueling, repairing, and logging every hour as the engines ran day and night, their roar echoing across the water. At the end of the marathon, the engines were torn down and inspected. Pistons and bearings showed wear, but nothing had failed. The numbers told their own story. Over 34 days of continuous operation, the boats covered a distance equal to the circumference of the Earth. This wasn't just a stunt. Mercury splashed the results across magazine ads and dealer showrooms, inviting journalists to witness the teardown. The message was clear. These engines didn't just survive, they thrived under punishment that would destroy ordinary motors. For boaters and racers, the Black Mercury became a badge of honor, a promise that if you ran hard, the engine would bring you home. Test crews, often anonymous, sometimes celebrated in trade journals, became the unsung heroes behind the myth. Their grit and sweat as much a part of Mercury's story as any engineering breakthrough. Endurance, risk, and spectacle turned Mercury's durability from a factory claim into a public legend. The company's market power now rested not on words, but on feats witnessed and retold, a reputation hammered out on the water, mile after relentless mile. In 1961, the world outside Mercury's test lakes and race circuits began to close in. The company, now a force in the marine market, caught the attention of Brunswick Corporation, a giant in the leisure products world. Negotiations moved quickly. By the end of that year, Karl Kiekhaefer agreed to a merger that would fold his fiercely independent company into Brunswick's expanding portfolio. The deal brought new resources, but also a new kind of oversight. For the first time, Mercury's future would be steered not by a single obsessive engineer, but by a boardroom of executives focused on growth, risk management, and mass market appeal. Inside Mercury, the atmosphere changed. The relentless, sometimes chaotic energy of Kiekhaefer's leadership gave way to layers of management and formalized procedures. Engineers who once answered directly to the founder now found themselves navigating memos and meetings. Product development shifted from midnight sprints and gut decisions to carefully scheduled timelines and budget reviews. The company's legendary secrecy remained, but the culture of personal rivalry and all-night rebuilds faded as Brunswick's priorities took hold. Karl Kiekhaefer stayed on for several years, but his influence waned. Disagreements over the brand's direction, especially the balance between racing prestige and mainstream sales, grew sharper with each new product cycle. In 1969, after nearly 3 decades at the helm, Kiekhaefer resigned. The founder's exit closed a chapter defined by risk and obsession. Mercury Marine, now fully under Brunswick's control, prepared to face a new era where competition would come not just from within, but from rivals across the Pacific and changing expectations back home. By the early 1970s, a new kind of competition arrived on American docks. Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda engineers brought engines that didn't roar for attention. They simply started, ran quietly, and kept running year after year. Their philosophy was different from Mercury's legacy of brute force and mechanical risk. Japanese brands focused on refinement, fuel efficiency, and a kind of reliability that didn't need to be proven in a race or endurance trial. Dealers noticed a shift. Boaters who once bragged about surviving on 3 cylinders now talked about engines that never missed a beat. Mercury's badge, once a guarantee of outlasting anything on the water, faced a quiet but relentless challenge. The impact rippled through the market. Yamaha's entry into the U.S. in the late 1970s, followed by Suzuki and Honda, changed what buyers expected from an outboard. Mercury's answer was power, bigger, faster, louder. Ads promised muscle, race reels showed engines pushed to the edge. But in showrooms, the questions changed. Customers asked about fuel savings and ease of maintenance. Dealers reported that buyers compared Mercury's horsepower to Yamaha's reputation for engines that just work. By the early 2000s, the pressure became impossible to ignore. Mercury struck a partnership with Yamaha, rebadging small 4-strokes to meet new emission standards. For some loyalists, this was unthinkable. A Mercury badge on a Japanese-built engine. Purists called it the Yamaha capitulation, worried that the soul of the brand was being outsourced. But the numbers told the story. Without a shift in strategy, Mercury risked losing its place in a market that now valued quiet confidence over sheer aggression. The era of American mechanical swagger was colliding with a new standard, one defined by precision, patience, and trust earned over thousands of uneventful hours on the water. Optimax was supposed to be Mercury's comeback, a direct-injected 2-stroke that promised cleaner emissions, better fuel economy, and the same punch that old-school boaters expected. But when the first production engines hit the water in the late 1990s, something went wrong. Owners reported engines that stalled, misfired, or simply refused to start after less than 100 hours. The air compressors, a key part of the new injection system, failed in clusters. Direct injectors clogged or corroded, sometimes leaving boaters stranded miles from shore. Dealers, caught in a flood of warranty claims, scrambled to keep up with angry customers and a growing backlog of repairs. Service bulletins stacked up. Mercury's technical hotline rang non-stop, with field engineers documenting failures that had been flagged in prototype testing but never fully resolved. Warranty claim rates soared above industry averages, especially for early 200 and 225 horsepower models. Some engines needed new compressors after only a few dozen hours. Others suffered catastrophic injector failures, leading to expensive repairs and repeated trips back to the shop. Class action lawsuits followed. Owners demanded answers, pointing to missed vacations, ruined fishing tournaments, and mounting bills for engines that had been sold as the future of Mercury reliability. Court filings revealed internal memos. Engineers had warned about weak points in the compressor design and injector durability, but the push to beat EPA deadlines and Yamaha's four-stroke advances had rushed the engine to market. Mercury responded with recalls, retrofit kits, and extended warranties for the worst-hit models. But for many dealers, the damage was done. Relationships with loyal customers, some built over decades, fractured under the strain of repeated breakdowns and slow fixes. The term bulletproof began to sound hollow. In marina parking lots and online forums, the old confidence in the Black Mercury badge gave way to frustration, skepticism, and a sense of betrayal. The cost of innovation had come due, and it was measured not just in dollars, but in lost trust. Verado landed in 2004 with a promise no other outboard dared make: supercharged four-stroke power, digital throttle, and the smoothness of a luxury car. Mercury's engineers called it the most ambitious project since the days of Lake X. The heart of the Verado was a 2.6-liter inline-six, force-fed by a belt-driven supercharger and managed by a Bosch-derived ECU. On paper, it was a technical marvel, faster, quieter, and cleaner than anything Mercury had built before. Early boat tests raved about the acceleration and the silky feel at the helm. But beneath the surface, complexity carried a hidden price. Owners soon discovered that the same digital controls that made the Verado feel futuristic could also leave them stranded. The first wave of ECUs, meant to coordinate everything from ignition to power steering, sometimes glitched without warning. Engines would drop into limp mode, throttle response would vanish, or the motor simply refused to start. The only fix? Dealer diagnostics and software updates, often after hours of troubleshooting. Water intrusion in harness connectors and voltage spikes from poorly shielded wiring added new variables that old-school mechanics had never faced. Service bulletins multiplied. Between 2005 and 2010, Mercury issued a string of software upgrades, harness replacements, and power steering retrofits. In some cases, entire wiring looms were swapped out to chase down elusive faults. The company extended warranties and rolled out Verado specialist training for dealers, but the learning curve was steep. What had once been a culture of field repairs and quick fixes now required laptops and proprietary tools. Independent mechanics found themselves locked out by encrypted diagnostics. Owners who prized self-reliance grew frustrated by their new dependence on certified dealers. For some, the promise of digital precision felt like a trade-off, unmatched performance, but at the cost of vulnerability to software bugs and electronic gremlins. The Verado's gamble was clear. Mercury had staked its reputation on a new kind of durability, one that relied on code as much as steel. In the process, the meaning of bulletproof began to blur, caught between innovation and the realities of life on the water. Mercury's V12600 horsepower outboard arrived like a thunderclap. For decades, engineers had dreamed of an outboard engine that could deliver the raw force of a V12, but with the finesse and practical serviceability demanded by modern fleets. Mercury's team set out to build not just the world's most powerful production outboard, but a technical showcase, one that would silence critics and reclaim the brand's reputation for daring engineering. The V12's 7.6-liter block stands alone in the marine world. 12 cylinders, naturally aspirated, produce a surge of torque that launches heavy offshore hulls onto plane in seconds. But it's the details that truly set this engine apart. Instead of turning the entire power head, the V12 steers by rotating its lower gear case, an electric system that lets boats run multiple engines side by side, each responding with precision to the helm. The 2-speed automatic transmission shifts seamlessly, keeping the engine in its sweet spot whether charging out of the hole or cruising at speed. Dual counter-rotating propellers bite into the water, translating every bit of that V12 muscle into forward motion, even on the heaviest center consoles. Joystick integration gives captains fingertip control, spinning and sliding boats with a touch, technology borrowed from luxury yachts, now standard on Mercury's flagship. Routine oil changes and maintenance can be done dockside, thanks to an easy-access service panel, a nod to the realities of commercial and charter operators. Early reviews from fleet operators and marine press called the V12 a revelation, quiet at idle, thunderous at full throttle, and surprisingly smooth even under punishing loads. Inside Mercury, engineers speak of the V12 as their proudest achievement, a machine that marries brute force with digital precision. For a company forged in the fires of mechanical risk, the V12 stands as both a tribute to that legacy and a bold new definition of what bulletproof can mean. Old-school Mercury owners still talk about the days when reliability meant forged steel, not firmware. In marina parking lots and online forums, the debate is no longer about horsepower, but about what it means for an engine to be truly dependable. One veteran owner, voice thick with skepticism, puts it plainly. You can't patch a microchip with a wrench. If the software locks up, you're stuck until a dealer can get to you. That sentiment echoes through Mercury focus groups, where seasoned boaters question whether digital controls and touchscreen dashboards can ever replace the confidence that came from a tool roll and a spare plug. For engineers inside Mercury, the definition of durability has shifted. They point to error-checking code, redundant sensors, and predictive diagnostics as the new armor against failure. Service logs and warranty data suggest that, on paper, modern engines break down less often than their mechanical ancestors. But the nature of those breakdowns has changed. A failed relay or a corrupted update can turn a weekend on the water into a lesson in helplessness. The old black motors could be coaxed home with a screwdriver and patience. Today, a blinking fault code might mean waiting for a laptop and a software patch. In focus group transcripts, the divide is clear. Some praise the power and precision of joystick steering and digital throttle. Others worry that every advance adds another layer of vulnerability. The word bulletproof itself has grown slippery. Does it mean a machine that shrugs off abuse, or a system that quietly avoids disaster through code? The answer depends on who you ask, and whether you measure trust in hours on the water or lines of software. The legend of Mercury's toughness now lives in a world where steel and silicon share the blame and the credit for every journey home. In 1940, Mercury's first redesigned engines generated over 16,000 advance orders, setting a new standard for reliability. Decades later, confidential service bulletins and recall documents from the Optimax and Verado eras reveal how engineering risks exposed new vulnerabilities, challenging the brand's claim of being truly bulletproof. The arrival of Japanese competitors in the 1970s forced Mercury to adapt, shifting from mechanical simplicity to digital complexity, a transformation documented in both internal memos and product manuals. Yet some technical details about early failures and corporate decisions remain classified or redacted in official archives. Today, the 600-horsepower V12 platform stands as proof of Mercury's continued ambition, but also raises questions about long-term durability in the software-driven age. The files and footage confirm one fact: Mercury's reputation was forged in relentless pursuit and tested by every gamble. What Bulletproof means now is debated, but the name endures, built on both the triumphs and the trials preserved in the record.